Hey everybody, good morning, happy Friday. The sun is shining where I am, and I hope it's shining where you guys are. Hope you guys are handling the difficult times being kind of trapped in your house or whatever, but I hope you're getting out a little bit, at least to just maybe take a walk. Or I know some of you are probably doing some work or still able to work, so that's probably a good thing. Take your mind off things, and hopefully this will get better soon. And fingers crossed, we might actually see each other in a classroom before the end of this year. That would be good because I miss you guys, and I mean that. So, anyway, I wanted to just touch base and update a few things, just make sure everybody's on track. I've marked all the assignments for Act 1, all the ones that were submitted, which was almost all of them. I'm still waiting on a couple. So you should have them back. I've reattached your written assignment and I've put comments in your assignments that explains or tries to explain why you got the marks you got for the particular questions. And as always, if you have any questions about your mark, please let me know and we can work through those questions. So I want to do a couple things. First thing I want to do is just show you what I've done here is I've posted on the class page here a plot summary for Act 1. Since we finished Act 1, it just summarizes what happened in the act so that you can refresh your memory as you move on to Act 2. And I'll keep doing this as we go through the play so that by the end you'll have a good summary of the whole play. Right now what I'd like to do is I would like to walk you through how you read Shakespeare. Just a reminder, some things we've talked about when we did Hamlet and Macbeth and Romeo and Juliet, etc., but maybe with a bit more depth. So what I want to do is look at Lear's first major speech. This is the Act 1, Scene 1. It's almost at the beginning of the play. And so we have that conversation with Kent and Gloucester and Edmund, where Gloucester gives the backdrop and explains that Edmund's illegitimate, but that he still really loves him. He introduces him to Kent. Kent says, "Oh, well, if you're that good a person, I'd like to get to know you." And Edmund says that, I'll try and show you the kind of good person I am, which of course becomes quite ironic later when we find out what a jerk Edmund really is. And then Lear interrupts this conversation. He comes into the room and he gives this speech. "Meantime, we shall express our darker purpose. Give me the map there. Know that we have divided in three our kingdom, and 'tis our fast intent to shake all cares and business from our age, conferring them on younger strengths, while we, unburdened, crawl toward death. Our son of Cornwall, and you, no less, our loving son of Albany, we have this hour a constant will to publish our daughter several dowers, that future strife may be prevented now. The princes, France and Burgundy, great rivals in our youngest daughter's love, long in our court have made their amorous sojourn, and here are to be answered. Tell me, my daughters, since now we will divest us both of rule, interest of territory, cares of state, which of you shall we say doth love us most, that we our largest bounty may extend, while nature doth with merit challenge? Goneril, our eldest born, speak first." Okay, so a few things about reading Shakespeare. Again, the idea is to read it as if it's speech, as opposed to poetry. So the first few lines you wouldn't read, or you would read, "Meantime we shall express our darker purpose. Give me the map there. Know that we have divided in three our kingdom, and 'tis our fast intent to shake all cares and business from our age." You wouldn't read it breaking at the line ends. "Meantime we shall express our darker purpose. Give me the map there. Know that we have divided in three our kingdom, and 'tis our fast intent to shake all cares and business from our age." That sounds weird. You want to read it as if it's speech, because that's, of course, what it is. When Lear says, "Give me the map there," he's obviously speaking to somebody in the room, and it underlines the idea that this is a drama. It's meant to be performed and not simply read from the page like a novel would be. Okay, so what I'd like to do is I've bolded some words, I've underlined some phrases. I'd like to walk you through how to look at the key words in a passage to kind of figure out what the passage means. So I've chosen these, and because I think they're key words. And so let me just walk you through. So the first word I've chosen is "we." Why does Lear use "we," right? it's just him. He's going to give his opinion. Well, the reason he does it is this is what's known as the royal we. And monarchs used this, especially in England, whenever they wanted to refer to themselves. And the reason they do this is it became fashionable under James the First. It predates James the First, but James the First really focused on it because he was a proponent of something called the divine right of king. And the divine right of kings is the idea that the king was essentially God's representative on earth. He was kind of second in command. And for all intents and purposes, what the king said was what God wanted. This is the kind of assumption behind kingdom or kingship that James held and expected his subjects to hold. And so using we is not necessarily to indicate plural. It is to indicate the plural, but it's an echo of Genesis 1:26. In Genesis 1:26, God talks about creating human beings. But the grammar in the Bible, and it's translated this way, is let us make man in our image, us. And it's biblical evidence that God is a trinity. God is more than one person existing as one God. And so the kings in England and other places borrowed this use of the plural pronoun for a singular person to remind people that they are essentially divine. Okay, so that's why he says we, and this happens all through Shakespeare, kings referring to themselves as we. The second word is darker. Okay, darker obviously literally means less light, but in this case it's metaphorical, or the connotation of the word is darker. Two possible things. One, it could be secret or hidden, or it could also be negative or risky, dangerous, edgy, that sort of thing. And of course, this meaning becomes ironic as the play moves on. Lear's intention is to reveal what he's secretly thinking, and which is, of course, to divide his kingdom up. It becomes ironic because, of course, the division of the kingdom does become a dark, dangerous, risky thing, and it ends tragically. So that word darker is important. Give me the map there is just simply an indication that this is meant to be performed. He's speaking to somebody. It's dialogue. Fast intent. Intent is just a desire. And so fast means I want to do this quickly, right? So fast intent is a firm decision or intention, so as in holding fast. It's also he wants to do it right away, right? So he's resolved to do what he proposes. Unburthened. This is an interesting anachronism. It should be unburdened. That's how we would spell it. But in Old English, th was represented by a d, a letter called an eth, which looks like a d with a slanted vertical stick and a stroke through it. So like a D and a leaning T crossed, mixed together. And letter was replaced with a TH for a while, but eventually it just became, they just replaced it with a D. And so it became unburdened. And it's just because that's how it sounds when you say unburdened, even sounds like unburdened. And so they finally just thought, well, you know what, let's make it easier and we'll just use a D instead of a TH. Another word that does this is murder. The word murder, it used to be murther, M-U-R-T-H-E-R. And eventually they just, it's the evolution of English. When he gets to son of Cornwall, he's referring to Cornwall, who is married to Regan, as his son-in-law. He just calls him his son. This hour is, of course, right now. Constant will. Again, this echoes fast intent, right? It's my desire, my immediate desire, my resolved desire to publish, which is just a way of saying make public. Okay, I'm going to reveal our daughters several dowers. So several just means there's more than one daughter, so there's more than one dower, several. And a dower is a gift or an inheritance or a legacy. It's usually a bridal gift given in return for the marriage of a daughter. So in the upper classes, men who married women could expect to receive a gift, usually money or property, often both, from the father of the bride. Right? Since women had no way of earning money, they would bring all their money to the marriage. And so a dower is this gift, this one-time gift from the father of the bride to the groom and the family. And this continued into the 20th century. If you've watched Downton Abbey, that's one of the reasons why the Earl of Grantham, Crawley, marries his wife. She's an American, right? She's not a British aristocrat, which is who he should marry. But he married her because she was the daughter of a millionaire in the United States, and he needed the money. And this happened a lot because under English law, once the woman comes to the marriage, anything she owns or possesses becomes the husband's. So he married her for her money. Now, in the show, it turns out they actually love each other, but that wasn't always the case. So the idea is his daughters will have dowers, okay, will have inheritances. And of course, in this case, it means they're going to get part of the kingdom as their inheritance. And he says here that strife, of course, is conflict. He says here that in so doing, he hopes to prevent future strife. I think what he means is that if he gives them their property now, they don't have to worry about what they're going to get later on. And then once he does die, everything will already be decided. So hopefully by then any issues will be resolved. And so his intention is to prevent future conflict by settling the matter now. This, of course, is foreshadowing because in trying to solve this conflict, he actually creates it, which is what leads to the tragedy of the play. Then he goes on to mention that because one of his daughters, Cordelia, is not yet married, he's going to solve that problem as well, so he can tie everything up rather neatly. France and Burgundy are the two dukes or lords. France is a king, and Burgundy is probably a duke, which in these times would be roughly equivalent to a king. France and Burgundy are rivals, so they're competing for the youngest daughter, who we know as Cordelia's love. So he sets up the thing here. An amorous sojourn. Amorous just means loving. Sojourn means visit or stay. So they've been around for a while waiting to resolve which one of them is going to end up marrying Cordelia, and he says that today they are to be answered. So we'll make this decision today. Then he moves on to the key part for him anyway, and that is that he's going to make these decisions, so he says, based on how much they can convince him that they love him. Before he does that, though, he mentions one other thing. He says, we will now divest us both of rule, interest of territory, and cares of state. So he wants to give up the daily grind of being a king. He doesn't want to make the decisions that are involved in being a ruler. He's not interested in organizing territorial issues or defending the country or any of that sort of stuff. And he doesn't want to do any of the statecraft that is required of a king. He's going to give all that to his daughters, and then he presumably will just retire, essentially. Which I should point out is something kings never do. Like, that's just not something a king should do. A few years ago, you guys might be old enough to remember this, but Pope Benedict he retired essentially from being pope. That's only ever happened one other time in the Catholic Church, where a sitting pope has given up the papal chair. And it was in the 13th century. It was like 12 something. It just doesn't happen. Kings aren't allowed to retire. One of the obligations of being a king is you're in it for life. And so Lear is doing something very unusual and not really accepted at this point. Anyway, the contest he puts forward is he wants to know which one of them loves him the most. So they're going to have to perform in front of all these assembled people, and there probably would be a number of people assembled. This would be like Act 1, Scene 2 of Hamlet, where Claudius and Gertrude explain about the death of the old Hamlet. It's full of people. Everybody's listening to them. They're making a public speech. So these daughters are going to have to, they're like performing seals. They're going to have to, stand in front of the entire court and talk about how much they love their dad. And the whole thing is quite ridiculous, which of course Cordelia picks out right away. And so he goes on to say that our largest bounty, so the biggest part of the kingdom, so that we can give the biggest part of the kingdom. And then he says, where nature doth with merit challenge. So I think what he's saying here is nature being what a person is naturally like, merit being a person's quality or character. And I think what he's saying is which daughter will demonstrate her true nature by the merit of her words. So it's clear that the daughters are competing, which he basically said he wanted to avoid, but they're going to compete with each other to see who gets the best piece of land. So that's basically the premise. A few other things that are revealed here is we know that Goneril is the oldest, so he's establishing the birth order, right? So it says Goneril, our eldest born. So we know Goneril's the oldest. He's already mentioned that Cordelia is well, he doesn't say Cordelia, but we know Cordelia is the youngest from other things that are said in this scene. So we know the birth order. We know Goneril is the oldest, Regan is the second oldest, and Cordelia is the youngest. We also know the birth order in Gloucester's family. We know that Edmund is not only illegitimate, but he's the younger son of Gloucester. So that means that even if Edmund was legitimate, he still wouldn't have inherited Gloucester's kingdom. Right? He thinks it's because he's a bastard. He talks about how it's because he's, people see him as a bastard, as illegitimate, as base, because somehow it's his fault that his mother wasn't married to Gloucester. Well, that's true. That is unfair. But it wouldn't have mattered because Edgar would have inherited the kingdom anyways, even if Edmund was his legitimate brother. Okay, so there's some things there. The idea is read it as a natural speech and then learn to pick out the key words. So when you see a phrase you're not sure about, do a little research, which is exactly what I did, right? I didn't just make this up. I looked at these things up. I mean, some of the things I knew, but there are things that I had eventually at some point looked up. Okay, so that's how you would naturally read that phrase and take it apart to kind of understand what he means. Okay, see you soon.